Margaret Hill trusted Laura Mitchell with her life, but what started as care soon turned into a nightmare. When police stepped inside Margaret's home, they uncovered a chilling secret that no one could have imagined. In a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Portland, Oregon, 68-year-old Margaret Hill lived a peaceful life in her cozy single-story home. Her garden was always blooming, her curtains always neatly drawn, and her mailbox filled with cheerful postcards from relatives who adored her. But after suffering a mild stroke, Margaret's independence slowly faded. Her family, living hours away, decided to hire a caregiver to help her with daily tasks. That's when Laura Mitchell entered her life. At first glance, Laura seemed perfect. She was calm, patient, and spoke with the gentle tone of someone who truly cared. She moved into the house full-time, managing meals, medication, and household chores. For the first few months, things seemed to go smoothly. Neighbors often saw Laura pushing Margaret's wheelchair down the block or sitting with her on the porch during sunset. To anyone passing by, they looked like a devoted nurse and her grateful patient. But small changes began to creep in, subtle enough to go unnoticed at first. Margaret, who loved chatting with the mailman and waving to neighbors, started keeping her curtains closed. Her usual laughter that used to echo across the street was gone. Friends who called often heard Laura's voice instead, explaining that Margaret was too tired to talk. It didn't raise alarm immediately. After all, recovery could be exhausting. But when weeks turned into months, the unease started to grow. The friendly woman who once joined online church meetings suddenly stopped logging in. Her groceries, usually full of fresh produce, were replaced by deliveries that Laura alone collected. The first person to sense something wrong was Margaret's niece, Allison. She tried to call her aunt several times, but every attempt ended with Laura picking up and claiming Margaret was sleeping or resting. Allison asked for a video call, but Laura said her aunt didn't feel presentable. Days passed, and the excuses became repetitive. When Allison finally asked to speak to Margaret directly, Laura promised to arrange it soon. That call never came. After 2 full weeks of silence, Allison's worry turned to fear. She called the local police department to request a welfare check. To her, it was just a precaution, something to ease her anxiety. But for the officers responding to that call, it would be the beginning of a case far darker than anyone could imagine. When officers arrived at Margaret Hill's home for the welfare check, the house appeared calm and spotless, almost to perfect. The curtains were drawn tight, blocking out the morning sunlight. Laura Mitchell opened the door with a polite smile, her uniform neatly pressed and her tone reassuring. She explained that Margaret had recently traveled to visit a distant cousin for some rest and recovery. Her story sounded believable. She even mentioned that Margaret had left a few days ago and planned to be gone for several weeks. The officers nodded, but something about her composure seemed oddly practiced, as if she had rehearsed each word. Inside, the house looked tidy to the point of sterility. The faint scent of bleach lingered in the air, and every surface gleamed as though freshly scrubbed. Margaret's wheelchair sat in the corner, its seat cushion missing. Officer Daniels glanced around, noticing that the house felt lifeless. No personal warmth, no sign of a woman who had once loved her home. Laura guided them through the living room and kitchen, speaking confidently about her patient's health and habits. She pointed to a few family photos on the shelf, but there were no recent pictures, only old ones from years before. When Daniels asked to see the bedroom, Laura hesitated slightly before unlocking the door. The bed was neatly made, the drawers organized, but something didn't feel right. There were no signs of daily use, no clothes left out, no books on the nightstand, and no trace of Margaret's medication bottles. Laura claimed she had packed everything for the trip, but Daniels found it strange that the closet was completely empty. He made a note in his report, but didn't push further. As they were leaving, he asked to take a look at the basement. Laura quickly explained that it was sealed off due to mold treatment and handed him a fake-looking notice from a non-existent cleaning company. Though there wasn't enough evidence to question her, Daniels couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly off. Her politeness felt too smooth, her explanations too convenient. Back at the station, he shared his doubts with his partner. They decided to check Margaret's supposed travel records, only to find no evidence of her leaving town. That uneasy discovery led Daniels to request a search warrant for the property, unaware that what they would uncover next would change the entire course of the investigation. When police returned to the house with a search warrant 2 days later, the calm, orderly atmosphere from before had vanished. The back door was slightly ajar, and there was no sign of Laura Mitchell anywhere. Inside, lights were left on, and the once spotless kitchen now looked hastily abandoned. A pot sat cold on the stove, dishes unwashed in the sink, and a faint draft carried the smell of damp air from below. The officers moved cautiously, searching each room. Margaret's bedroom remained untouched, except now a few of her belongings had been removed. Her jewelry box, family album, and important documents were missing. It was as if someone had tried to erase her presence altogether. When they reached the basement door, Officer Daniels noticed that the supposed mold treatment notice had been torn down. They broke the lock and descended into the dim, musty air below. What they found wasn't mold but a series of neatly stacked plastic storage bins and a metal cabinet secured with a padlock. Inside the bins were stacks of old medical forms, appointment notes, and ID cards belonging to elderly people from different towns. None of the names matched Margaret Hill. As they dug deeper, the discovery grew even stranger. There were photographs, dozens of them each showing an elderly person sitting or lying in what looked like their homes or hospital beds. Some photos were labeled with dates, others with notes about medication schedules and trust access. In the locked metal cabinet, the officers found a small black notebook. Its pages were filled with handwritten entries detailing the health conditions, medications, and bank details of multiple elderly patients. It read like a caretaker's log, but the tone was cold, almost clinical. One name appeared at the bottom of a recent entry: Margaret Hill. The entry stopped abruptly after the words, "Final dose administered." The realization was horrifying. This wasn't the record of a caregiver, it was a methodical plan. Forensics arrived and collected every piece of evidence, from fingerprints to vials of unknown substances found on a shelf nearby. The more they uncovered, the clearer it became that Laura Mitchell wasn't just a caregiver. She was someone who had built an entire life around deception, moving from town to town, targeting the vulnerable, and disappearing without a trace once her work was done. Still, Margaret herself remained missing, and the search for answers was only beginning. The search for Laura Mitchell intensified as investigators began piecing together her true identity. Fingerprints taken from the basement evidence led to a shocking discovery: there was no official record of anyone named Laura Mitchell fitting her description. The caregiver's license, references, and background check had all been expertly forged. When detectives dug deeper, they uncovered a trail of false identities spanning several years and multiple states. Each time, she had worked under a different name, taken care of an elderly patient, and disappeared after that person's unexplained death. Her pattern was chillingly consistent, yet she had managed to stay one step ahead of law enforcement every time. Investigators tracked recent bank transactions linked to Margaret Hill's account and found several cash withdrawals made days after her supposed trip. Surveillance footage from a nearby ATM showed Laura disguised with a scarf and sunglasses making the withdrawals. That image shattered any lingering hope that she might have simply fled. It was now a manhunt. Detectives believed Laura, or whatever her real name was, had not only stolen money, but could have been responsible for the deaths of several vulnerable people under her care. As police expanded their search, they interviewed former clients of the same home care agency she'd supposedly worked for. None of them remembered her personally, and the agency's owner confirmed that the woman had never been an official employee. She had used the company's name to build trust with families, preying on their desperation to find help for their loved ones. Her precision, organization, and calm demeanor made her deception nearly flawless. A week into the investigation, a break came from an unexpected source. A local gardener, trimming bushes in Margaret's backyard, noticed an area near the garden shed where the soil looked recently disturbed. He alerted the police, who immediately cordoned off the scene. Forensic teams dug carefully, uncovering a shallow grave containing personal belongings: Margaret's necklace, a watch, and several items that clearly belonged to her. Alongside them were traces of fabric from what seemed to be her clothing. The discovery confirmed everyone's worst fear, but the body itself was too decomposed to identify immediately. As the coroner took the remains for testing, detectives knew one thing for certain: Laura Mitchell had gone from being a caregiver to a predator, and her secret life was only beginning to surface. Weeks of intense investigation finally led authorities to a breakthrough. Using a combination of surveillance footage, bank records, and digital forensics, police were able to trace Laura Mitchell, whose real name was revealed to be Sarah Dutton, to a small apartment in another state. She had assumed yet another identity, using the personal information of a different elderly client to rent the space. When officers arrived, They found her meticulously organized, with folders, lists, and new identification documents neatly stacked on a table. Among them was a handwritten ledger containing names, addresses, and medical details of potential future clients, showing that she had been planning her next moves with the same cold, calculated precision as her past crimes. Forensic teams confirmed the DNA of the remains found in Margaret Hill's backyard matched Margaret herself. The evidence indicated that Margaret had been sedated over time, not violently attacked, but her condition had been exploited to give Sarah the opportunity to steal her identity and finances. The notebook from the basement, combined with the ledger in Sarah's apartment, painted a chilling portrait. She wasn't just a thief. She was a manipulative predator who had systematically targeted the most vulnerable. Every patient she cared for had been meticulously monitored, controlled, and ultimately erased from the lives of those who trusted her. News of the arrest sent shockwaves through the community. Neighbors who had once smiled and waved at Laura now struggled to reconcile the friendly face they knew with the criminal mastermind uncovered by the investigation. Authorities worked tirelessly to cross-check the lists Sarah had kept, identifying additional victims who were either missing or had passed away under suspicious circumstances. The full extent of her crimes may never be completely known, but the pattern was clear. Sarah had used her charm, patience, and apparent devotion to conceal a disturbing secret that had spanned years and states. The trial revealed further disturbing details. Sarah's meticulous planning, attention to medical needs, and ability to manipulate families were all central to her defense being denied bail. She had shown no remorse during the arrest or questioning, further confirming the calculated nature of her crimes. Meanwhile, Margaret Hill's family struggled to come to terms with the fact that the aunt they loved and had entrusted to a caregiver had been betrayed in the most intimate and horrifying way possible. In the aftermath, authorities emphasized the importance of vigilance when hiring caregivers, stressing that even the most professional-seeming individuals could hide sinister motives. The case of Margaret Hill would remain a haunting reminder. Trust, when placed in the wrong hands, can have devastating consequences. Sarah Dutton's arrest ended one chapter of terror, but it left a lasting scar on everyone who had unknowingly crossed paths with her.